Dear class, welcome back to Introduction to Comparative Politics. This is Sophia Barkett. Let's look at major concepts from Chapter 1 of the textbook. What is comparative politics? As we talked about in class, it is a subfield within political science that looks inwardly at states. Why would it do that? Basically, political scientists want to understand the political systems, ideologies, social movements, political development, economic development, political violence, types of regimes, and other kinds of things that are related to politics and happening within states, as opposed to the field of international relations, which looks at how states and other actors behave with each other or affect other states. What's a state? Is it, as we have in Arkansas in the US, Arkansas, Missouri, and other 50 states? It's different. Statehood has to do with having the authority to govern over a piece of land. Complete authority, okay? We call that sovereignty. How is this authority established? One way is being recognized as having that authority by other states. You may have to fight a war of independence to become sovereign. You could go to the polls. You could have a plebiscite to determine this. Example of a state. The US is a state with respect to international relations, but Arkansas is not a state. It's part of the US. States. So we have over 195 states in the world today. Each is independent and has right to self-rule. However, two don't have membership at the United States, or did not. As recently, we see Palestine trying to have membership. And it's been trying that for a long time. But with the attack on Gaza, this is becoming a reality. The Vatican does not have membership. Some are not recognized as independent states. Taiwan, for example. Some areas are dependencies or part of kingdoms. For example, Greenland, which is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. And we're hearing a lot about Greenland these days, right? Comparative method or research. What's it about? So what is the comparative approach? Start with a question. For example, you might ask how revolutions get started. So how are you going to figure that out? See if you can gather information about revolutions. You need data. Then you can examine causal relationships, cause and effect between variables. The single case. One way to do this is to examine a single case and examine the phenomena over different regions or in different periods of time. An example would be look at the federal parliamentary elections in India for the 1950 to 2023 timeframe. So these are longitudinal studies. You focus on one country, you look at one particular kind of thing over very long periods of time. Two or more cases. So now you have a little bit more time on your hand. You have some information on India, maybe some on Japan, and you're going to compare. So you're looking at parliamentary elections in India and Japan between 1950 and 2023. You might also look at food aid distribution in India, for example, in Assam or Kerala or West Bengal. You could look in all three for 1950 to 2023 timeframe. Cross-sectional studies. Sometimes you do extremely large studies where you have very large number of cases, like the set of all nations in the world or in a continent, etc. A cross-sectional study is one in which we study many cases, but over a shorter period of time. Example, examining parliamentary elections in 54 nations in Africa between 2020 and 2023. If it's both cross-sectional and longitudinal, then the time frame will be much longer, right? Example would be from 1950 to 2023. Scientific bent. So the field is influenced by behavioralism. It's an empirical approach. It proposes that you observe reality. In this case, the social world, you can find patterns. Examine the data to see if any generalizations can be made. This is a method that developed in the early 1900s within the social sciences. Goals of comparative study. To understand relations between variables. Does X cause Y? What causes revolutions within states? This is the question we started with, right? So look at cases of revolutions and the social, economic, and political context in each, and trying to find some common variables. These common variables might not all be causes, but they always seem to be present. We call them correlates. Example, revolutions are preceded by political, economic, and social crisis. Something is not working anymore, and it has people agitated, so much so they want political, economic, and/or social change. There might be high employment, famine, disease outbreak, etc. at the same time. But are these causes or symptoms of breakdown? Process tracing. We will look at the histories of revolutions in each case to understand what the processes were that led to revolution. We call this process tracing. Methods. Read about the histories, isolate the processes. Talk to people who were there. So these are the ways in which we discover the causal relationships. Traditions in comparative politics. So I talked about how comparative politics is influenced by science, but the history of comparative politics begins much earlier. Before the 1900s, politics was mainly a philosophical tradition. Intellectuals wrote essays and books reflecting on observations of society. Some even pontificated about what a good society consisted of. The ancient Greek philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were like this. Some authors discussed about other authors. Few gathered quantitative data. This idea of gathering quantitative data just did not exist at the time. Some wrote about cases such as of particular wars. So there were certain people who did start to think about collecting some kind of qualitative understanding or not so much quantitative as in qualitative. An example would be Thucydides, who was a general during the history of the Peloponnesian War, and he actually wrote a book about this with the same title. So he looked at causes of the war. Why did it start? And he made a lot of not just his own observations, but he went and interviewed hundreds of people who were part of this time to understand why the war started. So this is a First kind of example of empirical study in political science. Human nature. Within this philosophical tradition, many have written about human nature. They want to psychoanalyze humans to understand why society is the way it is. Humans are the units of society, so it makes sense. Realism as an approach. So, before philosophical traditions that examine human nature as causes of war, peace, etc., were people were people that explained philosophical, natural, and social phenomena as the will of gods or of the spiritual realm. So things happened because gods intended them to happen. Socrates and Plato fall within this realist approach. They're moving away from spiritual explanations of reality. In fact, they believe in certain kind of spirituality, but they're not interested in it when it comes to social relations. Their main interest is trying to understand society. So they fall in the realist approach as they want to observe reality, but do on occasion explain things in terms of the whims of God. So they were part of a polytheist culture. Why compare? Coming back to the question, our desire to compare is nothing new. We see this behavior in the development of the physical and natural sciences as well. In chemistry, we have the periodic table that lists elements based on atomic weight and charge, or rather, atomic weight and number. But also chemical properties, right? In biology, we observe the natural world and then make generalizations about it. We compare and categorize what we observe, whether it's the class, order, family, genus, and species. So, how did we develop a comparative politics? How did it become a science? So we categorize social and political phenomena and entities. We observe phenomena and make generalizations about them. We're using the quantitative and qualitative methods to gather information. We compare and contrast observed social phenomena. We categorize them into states, classes, systems, etc. So we're behaving like a science. We're categorizing, we're comparing and contrasting, we're collecting data and trying to generalize. We say that politics or political science is a subfield, uh, and its subfields are not exact sciences because a lot of the work is based on theory, not on data, and it's really hard to establish the mathematical relationships. Starting with concepts. In social science, we deal with abstract ideas. We talk about concepts like democracy. But what does democracy mean? Do we all agree on the meanings? Ideal types. Having an idea about what social reality is like, we invent abstract types to represent this because we are vaguely sure of what should be included in these concepts. At least not everyone agrees. Example of ideal types that are opposites are democracy and autocracy. Let's try to define democracy. Do any of you agree? How about autocracy? The idea of democracy, let's take a look at how we might think about democracy. We tend to think of democracies as having general elections to elect public officials, right? Bill of Rights. Some kind of Bill of Rights might be in the Constitution, where freedoms of individuals, such as of speech, religion, assembly to protest, petitions, etc., might be protected. Maybe we are protecting private property as well in a democracy. Right to bear arms? That's a big question mark. Not all countries think that democratic behavior should include the right to bear arms. What about equality? Should we all have equal rights or should we all be equal when it comes to rights? What about equality of wealth, equal salaries, equal access to healthcare? Ideal types. Ideal types sometimes use polar opposites. We just talked about that, right? Example would be black versus white. Whether it's colors or races, we tend to talk in polar opposites. Democracy versus autocracy, these are political systems. Describe each type as the polar opposite of the other. This, in some of the cases, we do this. Democracies hold elections for public office, and so autocracies do not hold elections. So we created these categories as sort of the extreme types of cases. Ideal types in politics. How did we come up with ideal types? We know that Socrates, the Greek philosopher, used ideal types, but there may be older works. In Republic, written by Plato, Socrates is actually depicted in Plato's book. He engages in many debates or dialogues with his students. In it, he comes up with the idea of a perfect state. He calls this Callipolis. So, Callipolis, in it, there are philosopher kings, and for um, these philosopher kings are not just, those who are born, um, through claiming divine right or through birthright. They're born into the families of kings, right? So this is not that. This is where the king is chosen based on his wisdom. So people have to actually be extracted from society. They have to be identified. If they fit this category, then they could be kings. So this is the type of society that um, was an ideal type in the sense of trying to create a perfect kind of state. So I think we'll leave it at this for now. In the book, we also have certain kinds of categories. I'm going to make a different kind of video about that.